Put brass in the last. There are rules. No brass in the last. And we're only singing the fourth. On the fourth. Triumphal Baptist Church, if you'll turn your hymnals to song number 49. Song number 49, Meet Me There. We'll do all three verses on the first. On the happy golden shore where the faithful find no more, when the storms of life go o'er, meet me there. Where the night dissolves away into pure and perfect day, I am going home to stay. Meet me there. Meet me there. Where the tree of life is blooming, meet me there. Where the storms of life are on the happy golden shore, where the faithful part no more, meet me there. Here our fondest hopes are made, dearest lakes are entwined, but in heaven a common pain, meet me there. By the river sparkling bright, in the city of delight, where our faith is lost inside, meet me there. Meet me there. Meet me there. Where the tree of life is blooming, meet me there. Where the storms of life are on the happy golden shore, where the faithful part no more, meet me there. Where the harps of angels ring and the blessed forever sing, in the palace of the King, meet me there. Where in sweet communion blend, heart with heart and friend with friend, in a world that never shall end, meet me there. Meet me there. Meet me there. Where the tree of life is blooming, meet me there. When the storms of life roll on the happy golden shore, where the faithful part no more, meet me there. Hey, great seeing you. Brother Devin, could you open us in a word of prayer?
Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity to be here in your house with like-minded believers. Thank you for this time to sing these songs, praises to your name. Praise you bless our voices and our instruments, Lord, and all things in the service that we can recite. And in Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. If you'll turn your hymnals to our next song, number 129. Song number 129, Rock of Ages. We'll do all three verses. On the first, Rock of Ages, cleft for me. Let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood from thy wounded side which flow inside the corner right here. On the front page there, we have our verse, Acts chapter 20, verse 28. Take heed therefore unto yourselves and to all the flock over the which the Holy Ghost hath made you overseers, to feed the church of God, which he hath purchased with his own blood. Then over on the inside, on the inside there, we have our service time, Sunday morning at 10 a.m. and then Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. And then Thursdays at 7, we have our weekly Bible study where we are going through 2 Samuel. And you are at that tonight, except Brother Carter is not here, so we are going to have Brother Devin preaching for us. And so hopefully, Lord willing, we'll resume 2 Samuel next week. Sundays, we have our Bible game, sword drills, and songs at 3:05, right before the afternoon service. And then below that, we have our soul winning opportunities every Sunday at 12:30 following the morning service, and Saturdays at 10 a.m. And if you are interested in other soul winning opportunities, you can always reach out to Brother Carter for that. Below, we have the salvations and baptisms. Are there any salvations to report? All right. And then below that, we have the offering totals, tithes, offerings, missions givings below. Then over on the other page, we have the prayer requests. Are there any additions or updates for this? For the prayer requests? Okay. Over on the next page, we have the July challenge, which is preaching the gospel. So this month, the challenge is to attempt to preach the gospel to 5 people every day. So you have to attempt to give the gospel to 5 people, and even if they shut you down, that's still an attempt, so you have to make 5 of those. However, if you get a salvation before you reach those 5 attempts, then you have met the challenge for the day. So it's essentially either a salvation a day or 5 attempts, whichever one comes first. And if you do that for the entire month of July, then you will get a challenge for that. You will get a reward for that challenge. Below that, we have the hymn rehearsal, number 394, To the Work. And then we are in the review week for the Bible memory passage, 1 Timothy chapter 1. You have to be able to quote that word perfect without help by 11:59 this Sunday. And if you haven't already done it, that means you've got a few days to memorize 20 verses. And I believe in you, you can get this done. I mean, that's how many we got today, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days. That's only 5 verses a day. It's definitely possible. If you want to do this, you can do 5 verses a day. You can still get this chapter done. But if you do that, you get a prize. And then below that, we have the upcoming birthdays and anniversaries. It was Chase's birthday yesterday, turned 5 years old. And then below that, we have the upcoming events. We already had the anniversary that was this past Sunday, and that was a really great time. And then there's a men's preaching class in Norcross, down in Norcross, Georgia, on July 25th at 10 a.m. That's not this Saturday, but next Saturday. And of course, you have to be a soul winner in order to preach, but you can always just attend as a man. And so that, if you haven't been to one of those, I encourage you to go to one of those. I'm going to be trying to go to that, so if you want to carpool, talk to me about that. Then we have the Stronghold Baptist Church Music Kids Academy on August the 1st at 10:30. And so make sure to have that marked down. Don't forget August the 1st for the Kids Music Academy here at 10:30. And then on the back you have the sermon notes to be able to write down notes during the preaching. So make sure to utilize that to write down any good points or scriptures that you hadn't noticed, things of that nature. And with that, we will go into our next song, number 127. Song number 127, "'Tis So Sweet to Trust in Jesus." We'll do all 4 verses. On the first, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus, just to take Him at His word, just to rest upon His promise, just to know the simple Lord. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust turn in your Bibles to Proverbs chapter 27. While Brother Devin collects the offering. Proverbs chapter 27. And as we do, we'll read the entire passage if you'll follow along silently as I do that. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 1. Boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth. Let another man praise thee, and not thine own mouth, a stranger, and not thine own lips. A stone is heavy, and the sand weighty, but a fool's wrath is heavier than them both. Wrath is cruel, and anger is outrageous, but who is able to stand before envy? Open rebuke is better than secret love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. The full soul loatheth in honeycomb, but to the hungry soul every bitter thing is sweet. As a bird that wandereth from her nest, so is a man that wandereth from her place. Ointment and perfume rejoice the heart, so doth the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. Thine own friend and thy father's friend forsake not, neither go into thy brother's house in the day of thy calamity. For better is a neighbor that is near than a brother far off. My son, be wise and make my heart glad, that I may answer him that reproacheth me. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Take his garment that is surety for a stranger, and take a pledge for him of a strange woman. He that blesseth his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, it shall be counted a curse to him. A continual dropping in a very rainy day and a contentious woman are alike. Whosoever hideth the wind, and the ointment of his right hand which bewrayeth itself. Iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the counsel of his friend. Whoso keepeth the fig tree shall eat the fruit thereof, so he that waiteth on his master shall be honored. As in water face answereth to face, so the heart of man to man. Hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. As the finding pot for silver and the furnace for gold, so is a man to his praise. Though thou shouldest bray a fool in a mortar among wheat with a pestle, yet will not his foolishness depart from him. Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds. For riches are not forever, and doth the crown endure to every generation. The hay appeareth, and the tender grass showeth itself, and herbs of the mountains are gathered. The lambs are for thy clothing, and the goats are the price of the field. And thou shalt have goat's milk enough for thy food, for the food of thy household, and for the maintenance for thy maidens. Let's have a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this opportunity to come into your house and to sing praises to you, to fellowship, and to hear your word preached. Bless Brother Devin and fill him with your spirit. Give him clarity of mind and fill him with your spirit that he can have boldness and to be able to preach your word with power and with clarity. And fill us with your spirit that we can understand your word as it's preached and that we can honor and glorify you in all that we do, Lord. And give us safety during the service and give us safety as we go home. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
All right. Well, it's an honor to be filling in again here at Stronghold Baptist Church. I hope it'll be a blessing this evening. We're there in Proverbs chapter 27. We're actually going to be continuing with the normal theme of a Thursday evening Bible study theme, except instead of going through an entire chapter, we're just going to look at one verse. So we're going to do like a traditional old IFB, style of sermon in a way, because the entire sermon is going to be focused on one verse that we're finding here in Proverbs chapter 27. And verse 13 is the verse, and that verse is, "Take his garment that is surety for a stranger, and take a pledge of him for a strange woman." Now, this exact verse is also found in Proverbs 20, verse 16, so it's just the exact same thing. I'm not going to read it again. So you can, the context of both of these passages where you'll find this verse, of course, it's going to influence what this verse means and how it goes with the other things. But this verse, just like a lot of other proverbs, are a standalone verse. So this sermon, we're primarily going to be focusing on this one verse, not even necessarily getting into the surrounding context. And that's just kind of how the book of Proverbs works in general anyways. So the title of the sermon is based upon what's going on in this verse. And the title is Pledging Your Garment in Suretiship. And you might be like, I don't even know what that means. And that's kind of the point of the sermon, because the goal of this sermon is obviously to teach on this verse. But the first part of the sermon, we're going to be just going through what all the terms and the concepts are and what they mean. Because there's a lot of things that's being referred to in this verse that maybe are not common or maybe are not familiar to you. So I want to make those things clear. And then the second part, or the second point of the sermon, is going to be getting into the meaning, the interpretation, and all the applications, or at least some applications, we can get from this verse. So maybe you're asking why this verse? Why preach this sermon? This verse, I've gone through Proverbs several times, and this Proverbs just kind of always stood out as one of those interesting Proverbs, because it's kind of like, what is he saying? You kind of have to stop. Just the funny wording, just in my mind, just kind of demands that extra attention. It's one of those verses that's definitely easy to, if you're just reading, to just keep on reading. Like, what was that? I don't know. Keep going. So hopefully tonight, as our, custom is for a Bible study, we can stop, slow down, and dive into this verse. And hopefully by the end of the sermon, you'll have some kind of a good grasp, if not a very good grasp, of what this verse is talking about and what it means. So, and I think there's a great lesson. There's great lessons here you can have in this verse. In Proverbs chapter 1, verse 5, kind of along the theme of what we're doing this evening, the Bible says in Proverbs 1:5, a wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. So a wise man is going to hear and is going to increase in learning. And then verse 6 says, to understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. So some verses or some proverbs, since we're talking about proverbs, are very cut and dry. Like you read it and you know exactly what's going on. Some of them are more like a dark saying. And what does that mean? It's just something that's not apparent. It's a little bit hidden, like it's in the dark. So I think that this verse, in my opinion, is kind of like that. It tends to be like that for a lot of people. Obviously, if you know what it means, then it's not like that. But I would think that most people, even people that are reading their Bible regularly, this verse might be one of those dark sayings for them. So we're going to hopefully give you some good counsel this evening, and hopefully you'll be wise and listen and be able to understand the proverb and the interpretation of this proverb. This proverb 27, verse 13, and of course, chapter 20, verse 16. So point number 1, like I said, we're going to cover the concepts / the terms, okay? Depending on which verse it is, or which word it is. So if you could go ahead, you can keep your finger in Proverbs 27. This is obviously the verse we're going to be coming back to, looking at throughout the sermon. But we're also now going to be turning to Genesis chapter 15. If you could turn to Genesis chapter 15, and you can keep a bookmark or a ribbon or a bulletin in that Proverbs 27. We're going to be coming back there, looking at that throughout. So Genesis 15, you're turning there. And I'll just tell you on the surface what this verse is talking about. It is basically a financial verse. It's talking about a financial situation, financial decisions, really. But that's just kind of like a general idea. But I'm going to get into exactly what's going on. So here I have 5 different concepts or terms that I'm going to define first in this first point. And here are the terms we see. We see the word surety in the verse. So what is that? We're going to look at what that is. We see the concept, or not so much the term, but the concept of the stranger and how it's being referred to in Proverbs, specifically this verse. We see the word in this concept, pledge, here in this verse. We're going to look at that, so we know what that is. We see this idea of a garment being used as a trade item. We're going to look at that whole concept, understand that whole situation. Why is that significant in the Bible? And then we're going to look at this last one, which is probably maybe the easiest perhaps for most people, which is the strange woman, that concept or that type of a person that's referred to several times throughout the Proverbs. I think that's probably the easiest because you read Proverbs, it's one of those low-hanging fruits. It's not really a dark saying of what the strange woman is. But we're going to look at that too, all in this first point. All right, so the first one we're going to look at is the stranger. So we're going to look at all five. The first one is the stranger. Now, stranger is just someone that's foreign, all right? And it can be someone that's, it could be a positive type of a person that you would want to treat well or good or be kind or loving to. But it could also be in a context that is a negative context where this person you need to be aware of. They could be a danger, and they could lead you into sin, or you could get mixed up with this wrong crowd. So stranger is used in both ways, and in Proverbs it's used in the negative way. And I'm going to go ahead and show you these things from the Bible, and you'll see that. So the very first time we see the word stranger in the Bible is in Genesis 15, verse 13. And interestingly enough, it's also the very first time we see the word surety. So I'm not really going to focus too much on that, but you can kind of take note of that as we pass by, and I'll speak a little bit on that. Genesis 15:13 says, and hopefully I'm going to be going to a lot of different stories, so hopefully you know the Bible well enough to at least know the stories in general, so because I'm not going to be doing a lot of explaining of those things. Genesis 15:13 says, and he said unto Abram, know of a surety, and surety, I'll just tell you real quickly, here it means to surely or certainly, because God is talking to Abram, telling him, you're going to know this for sure, or surely know this, or certainly know this, what he's about to say, that thy seed shall be a stranger, that's the word we're focusing on right now, in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. So hopefully just right there you know what's going on with Abraham, or Abram as he's referred to here. In verse 14, and also that nation, of course, is Egypt, whom they shall serve, that seed, will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. So this is just referring to how Abram's seed are going to be strangers in a foreign land, in the land of Egypt. And to Egypt, they are the stranger. They're strange because they're not from there, because they are foreign to that place. So simple stuff. Maybe you already knew that. But we're going to get more into the way that Proverbs uses it. Pretty much, I'm sure, I think every single time in Proverbs, it's not just talking about a foreigner. It's talking about a foreigner in a negative context. It's a type of a stranger that you don't really want to have anything to do with. Like I say, maybe there's a time that's slipping my mind where it's in a positive light in Proverbs, but I'm pretty sure in Proverbs it's always negative. It's not always negative in the Bible. So let's look at those two examples here. So someone foreign to Israel, and of course the context of Proverbs is that it is King Solomon, the king of Israel. So if he's talking about a stranger, it's someone that is not of Israel. It's someone that would be someone else sojourning or dwelling in Israel as a foreigner. So that would be the context of how Proverbs would use the term stranger. All right, and we could apply it to, for us, instead of thinking of it as Israel or the people of God in that sense, we could think of it as just unsaved people, or maybe even wicked people, or whatever. Go ahead and turn to Leviticus chapter 19. So, like I was saying, we're going to see first a positive mention. We're going to see the positive mention of the stranger, someone that we should be, loving towards, treat them fairly, treat them like we would want to treat ourselves. But then we're also going to see a different way that stranger is used for the Israelites, or for the people of God, which is someone to be wary of, someone to be aware of, and to basically avoid and not to have any dealings with, because they're in this context of being a wicked person. So hopefully you'll see that. Hopefully that'll be clear. And then we'll apply that later when we're putting this all together when we go back to our Proverbs 27 verse. So Leviticus 19, verse 33, this is the positive example that I'm going to show you of the stranger. Leviticus 19:33, and if a stranger sojourn, and that's a temporary stay, they're not staying there permanently, they're just in there temporarily, they're sojourning, with thee in your land, ye shall not vex him. But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself. For ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So you're supposed to here treat the stranger like you would want to be treated. Love them. You were a stranger in the land of Egypt, so do unto them as you would have them do unto you. That's the positive. Let's go to Joshua chapter 23. We're going to look at a negative example of the stranger, and it really just depends on who the stranger is too. Stranger, it could be good or bad. It's just a foreigner, right? And this idea of a stranger being a bad type of a person in Proverbs, it's basically because we're talking about a bad type of a stranger. It's not that strangers are just always bad. Joshua 23, look at verse 11. Take good heed. Here's the negative example of a stranger. Take good heed, therefore, unto yourselves. So it's just saying what? Beware. Pay attention, take heed to yourselves, that ye love the Lord your God. Else, if you do in any wise go back and cleave unto the remnant of these nations. So these nations here are strangers. They're foreigners. They're foreign nations, and specifically these are the nations that God was driving out of the nation of the land of Israel that they were going to inhabit in their stead. These wicked nations, that's who we're talking about. They're also a stranger, or strange nations. Even these that remain among you, and shall make marriages with them, and go in unto them, and they to you. Know for a certainty that the Lord your God will no more drive out any of these nations from before you, but they shall be snares and traps and scourges in your sides and thorns in your eyes, until ye perish from off this good land which the Lord your God hath given you. So obviously, the type of stranger or foreigner in Leviticus 19 is a very different type of a stranger or foreigner in Joshua 23. It depends on what type of foreigner they are. And in Proverbs, the stranger is this negative example. All right? So you see that. Turn to Genesis chapter 43. So keep that in mind when we come back to this idea of what is a stranger. Why is it a bad thing that you're surety for a stranger? Why is the stranger, a bad thing? Or why is that even mentioned? Why not just be surety for anyone or for thy friend? Well, there is an element that we need to understand for the stranger, and it's a negative one. And I'll get into that as we continue. But now we're moving on to our next term, which is surety. Genesis 43. And we saw briefly, because it was the same verse, the first mention of surety, we saw that it meant to be sure or to be certain about something. Abram could surely know what God was about to tell him. He could know it of a surety, he said. And that right there is telling us what surety can mean there. But there's also a different way that surety is used in the Bible. And let's look at that now. Genesis 43. And I'll go ahead and tell you. So that there's the being sure of something, and then there's this other definition we're going to see in Genesis 43, and which is also used in Proverbs, which is to make someone else sure, or to make someone or something else certain or secure. It's basically this idea of you are being responsible to make something sure. And it's basically being used in a situation where you're in debt. You owe something. You have to do something. You're obligated to make something sure in a financial situation. And we'll see that in Genesis 43. Look at verse number 8. And Judah said unto Israel his father, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. Again, hopefully you know the story. This is where all Joseph's brethren are trying to convince their father to send with them Benjamin so that they can go buy corn in the land of Egypt because there's this famine. And hopefully you know the whole story with Joseph there. And what Judah is telling his father, hey, look, let Benjamin come with us, and I'll be surety, we'll see that in a minute, for him. Look at verse number 9, where Judah says to his father, I will be surety for him. Now, this is a different way. He's not saying I'll be searching for him. He's saying I'm going to make this sure. I'm going to be responsible for bringing Benjamin back. Let's keep reading the verse. I will be surety for him, and of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. So you see there, what does it mean that Judah is going to be surety for his brother Benjamin? He's saying, I'm making myself responsible to bring him back. And if he doesn't come back, that's on me. The blame is on me. So I'm going to make this situation sure. That's what he's saying. So that's what surety means there. And here, it's not even a financial situation necessarily. But like I said, in Proverbs, that verse is basically a financial situation, a money situation, being in debt for someone else, or agreeing to make someone else sure. And then we're going to get into that later as we continue talking about those things. So again, our verse here that we're looking at, Proverbs 27, verse 13, I'll just read it again as we're thinking about these things. Take his garment, we haven't talked about the significance of that yet, that is surety for a stranger. So being surety for a stranger is someone that is making themselves responsible for a stranger. And this is not a good thing. This is a negative situation that is being referred to in Proverbs. So we're probably going to assume that it's not a positive example of a stranger. It's probably a negative one, someone you don't want to have anything to do with. But that's what's going on with those things. Let's keep going. So this is not a good situation. And I'll read this proverb. If you're in Proverbs 27, you can turn back to Proverbs 11 and look at verse 15. This is another situation of being surety for a stranger. And we see very clearly here that it is not a good thing, so there's no guessing. Proverbs 11:15 says, he that is surety for a stranger, exact same thing, shall smart for it. Now, you might think, well, the word smart, I guess you're going to be getting more intelligent if you're, surety for a stranger. Well, smart here is just an older word that just means to be in pain, basically. You're going to hurt for this suretyship of a stranger that you're in. And that's why it says later, in case you're like, I don't know, I guess this sounds good. No, if you finish the rest of the verse, he rephrases it from an opposite perspective so we know what's going on. He that is surety for a stranger shall smart or hurt for it, and he that hateth or hates suretyship is sure. So that's the positive. So if you hate suretyship, you're not going to be doing it. That's why you're going to be sure. You're going to be steadfast yourself. You're going to be secure yourself, or financially secure yourself. If you're not constantly agreeing to make all these other people sure whatever debts they're signing up for, or you're not basically, you could think of co-signing for all these other people, then if you hate the idea of that, then you're going to now be more financially secure. Obviously, there's other situations, there's other financial choices you also need to make to contribute to that financial security. But a big part of that is not just agreeing, yeah, I got you, brother, I got you, I'll cover this, I'll cover that. That's not a good idea. It's not wise, especially for a stranger. There's a big element to that you also want to avoid. The Bible talks about in Proverbs being surety for your friend, which that's not good, but being surety for a stranger is different, and it's worse. Because at least your friend, this is like a lifeline you would have. This is like a brother, someone you could count on. If you didn't have it, maybe you could try to work something out, But a stranger, this, proverbial wicked person that doesn't even adhere to the God of the Bible, they got some other false wicked religion or some false wicked way of thinking about things in general, they're probably going to do whatever it takes to collect what you say you owe them or what you're going to do. And you don't want to be entangled with anything like that. So there is an element of being mixed up with a stranger that is worse than just being surety for someone that's in your family or someone that's your friend. As I said, I'm going to get more into those things as I get into more of the application and the interpretation of the proverb. Right now, we're just trying to define all the terms and the concepts so we can get there. Let's keep going. I already covered a lot of that. That's good. Okay, I have a note here just, kind of connecting the idea of being surety for someone. It's similar to when you make a vow in general. You're entangling yourself. You're putting yourself in a situation of bondage. You're obligating yourself to do whatever it is. I mean, being surety is just a certain example of a vow, basically. It's just a financial vow. And the problem with that is now it's not all maybe based upon what you're doing. It's now based upon what someone else does, which is not something you're going to be able to control. That's why it's a bad choice. Because in general, if you're making yourself obligated to do something, you don't want to do it with things that are outside of your control. You want to say, I promise to do this, and it be something you can actually control the outcome, at least relatively. Obviously, we all have a limited amount of control in general, but you don't want to be like, I promise that so-and-so is going to do this. It's like, that's not a good promise. So it's similar to a vow, and hopefully you know the Bible well enough to realize that you don't want to make vows. It's a bad idea, and in the New Testament commands us just to don't even make vows. Swear not at all. But that's a similar idea. I referred to this earlier. I'm not going to read this for sake of time. In Proverbs 6, verse 1 through 11, we see this whole situation of being surety for thy friend. So that's different than the stranger. And in this situation, we see, hey, you've basically put yourself in bondage. Give not sleep to thine eyes. And then he tells, hey, go to the ant, learn how to, not the ants here, but go to the ant and learn how hard of a worker they are to basically, so that you can be like that, so that you can pay this off and get out of this situation. Because it's not a good situation to be surety, even for your friend, and let alone a stranger. So you can read that in your own time if you'd like to. If you're in that situation, you want to work to get out of it, to work hard to get out of it, to pay that off. It is bondage. That's what we're seeing. Bad situation. Surety for a stranger. Summary, bad financial situation to be in. That's what you can understand, at least, if nothing else. Go ahead and turn to 2 Kings 18 now. We're going to look at this idea of a pledge now. Second Kings 18, look at verse 19. I think this verse does a really good job of kind of giving us a definition within the chapter, within the story here. Hopefully you know the story. I'm going to read a decent amount of scripture leading up to the verse just to get some of the context here. 2 Kings 18, look at verse 19. And Rabshakeh said unto them, speaking now to Hezekiah, thus saith the great king, the king of Assyria, what confidence is this wherein thou trustest? Thou sayest, but they are but vain words, I have counsel and strength for the war. Now on whom dost thou trust that thou rebellest against me? Now behold, thou trustest upon the staff of this bruised reed, even upon Egypt, on which if a man lean, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh king of Egypt unto all that trust on him. But if ye say unto me, we trust in the Lord our God, is not that he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah hath taken away, and hath said to Judah and Jerusalem, ye shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Now therefore I pray thee, give pledges to my lord, the king of Assyria, and I will deliver thee 2,000 horses, if thou be able on thy part to set riders upon them. So we see here Rabshakeh here trying to basically say, all right, you're not going to win this. I don't know what makes you think you're going to be able to withstand the king of Assyria. Are you trusting in Egypt? Because that's not going to work. Are you trusting the Lord? Isn't that the God that Hezekiah is telling you not to worship anyways? So just go ahead and make an agreement, make a pledge, he says, to my Lord, the king of Assyria. And then if you skip down, that was verse 23, he said there, give pledges to my Lord, the king of Assyria. This is the word we're looking at, the pledge. What is a pledge? Because we're talking about the Proverbs 27, where we're taking a pledge of a strange woman. What is a pledge? We're not talking about pledging allegiance to the flag or something here. This is something else. So let's figure out what it is. It's not something we maybe talk about a lot. The concepts are similar in our culture, but the terms that the Bible's using, we don't use on our everyday referencing these things. Give pledges, he said in verse 23. Skip down to verse 31. He re-says the same thing in a different way. Verse 31 says, hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria. Notice this, make an agreement with me by a present, and come out to me, and then eat ye every man of his own vine, and every one of his fig tree, and drink ye every one the waters of his cistern. So here, we're seeing a swap happen. We saw first give pledges. Now we're seeing make an agreement with me by a present, because that's what a pledge is. A pledge is when you take a gift, an item, or money, or whatever it is, and this is what you're using when you say, I'm going to do whatever it is, and here's a gift to show that I mean what I say. And that a pledge could be a temporary gift, or it could be a permanent gift. In the Bible, most of the time it's temporary, because usually when you give a pledge in the Bible, you would get it back later. I'm not sure if the pledge that he's talking about in this story is a temporary one, or is just a permanent what you're giving this king or not. Of course, they never even do it anyways. But in life, here's some examples you can think of. A temporary pledge or a gift or an agreement by a present pledge that's temporary you could think of that we would normally think of today would be like a car for an auto loan, right? You get an auto loan, and then the car for that auto loan that you're getting, the car, if you don't pay, is going to be that pledge. It's what whoever you're borrowing from, the bank or whoever, that's what they're going to get if you don't pay. That's the agreement you're making. You're saying, I'm going to pay the car loan, and if I don't, then you get this gift, my car. So that's the idea. Same thing with the house for a mortgage. That's like, it's this temporary, like, okay, here's the pledge, my house, you own the house until I pay what I say I'm going to pay. And if you pay most of your mortgage, but you don't pay all of it, and you stop paying, guess what? They're going to say, all right, I'm taking my house that you've been living in for however long. It's not your house until you pay it off. And even when you pay it off, it's not really yours. You got to pay taxes, but that's a different story. But that would be like a temporary pledge. But then there's also a pledge that could be permanent. You give that gift, you make that agreement by a present, and you don't ever get it back. That would be like a down payment on a house. It'd be like the earnest money, right? You give that down payment, the 20 or whatever % for the house. You don't get that back. But that is the same idea. You're giving that money, saying it's the earnest money, because you're saying, I'm serious about buying this. And that money is you putting your money where your mouth is. That's the whole idea. That's, instead of just shaking someone's hand and giving them your word, you're giving them a present to confirm your lips, is what's going on. That's the pledge. All right? So hopefully you understand that. Turn to Deuteronomy chapter 24. And we're going to see some of this in action here. And I'm going to read another example of actually, I'm not going to read this. I'm going to refer to this because I'm going to save time. So hopefully you know the story of Judah, one of the sons of Jacob, and the whole situation with Tamar. And if you want to read this, you don't know the story, read Genesis 38. So this situation, it's kind of a messed up story. If you don't know anything about it, this might just be more harmful than helpful. But in that situation, if you know the story, Judah basically did not know that his daughter-in-law was disguised as a prostitute or a harlot, because she had a veil over her face, and he was going to pay her for her services, as it is, by giving her a kid which is an animal. Okay, but he didn't have it on him. So, so what does he do? He gives her a pledge, and the pledge was the present. It was a temporary present in this case, that he would make this agreement with her that later he would give her the kid, was his signet, his bracelet, and his staff. These are things that he's going to want back. So he's like, all right, here's my signet, here's my bracelet, here's my staff, and then you hold on to this until later I'll actually get you the goods that you're wanting. So that would be just a story, if you know it, of those items being a pledge. And there's all kinds of situations like this, but I'm not going to get into all that just for sake of time. So hopefully you know what a pledge is. Now let's think about this idea of a garment being used as a pledge, because that's the other concept we need to get to. A garment being used as a pledge. You might think, why? Like earlier, we're talking about a car loan, and you're talking about a mortgage. All this earnest money. Like a garment, using that as like collateral or a down payment or some type of a present. It's like, yeah, you can trust me. Here's my socks. It's like, I don't really know if I believe you. That's something like a homeless guy might try. Like, hey, you can trust me because here's a jacket. It's like, okay, appreciate it, but I might require a little bit more than that to really take you seriously. But in the Bible and in Bible days, a garment was a much more valuable and vital item that you needed. All right? And we're going to look at this so that we can understand what is going on in Proverbs 27. This garment being used for a pledge, like who would even accept that? Well, let's learn about it. We're going to see here in Deuteronomy, and we're going to look at Exodus, that a garment was basically this last lifeline, this last financial item you had that was like your lifeline that could be used as a valuable trade-in item that you really don't want to trade in. You want to always have a garment. Because in the Bible, people just didn't have, most of the time, especially if you're poor, you didn't have these multiple changes of garments. You didn't have all these outfits. These days we got a closet and it's just, a big old closet filled with all these, different changes of clothes, shirts, dresses, or whatever, jackets. We got all these blankets. We're getting rid of all this stuff because we just got too much of it. That's not how it was throughout, history. And people throughout history didn't just have these really nice, ventilated buildings. They had tents and it wasn't all that insulated. So you would really need this garment, your only garment, to keep you warm and survive in the night, especially if it's really cold. You think about if you've ever gone camping, you really want and it's colder in the night, it gets cold at night, you really want that warm sleeping bag, right? That's kind of the idea here. Let's see that. And because it was so hard, and why were garments so valuable? Because they were harder to make. These days, machines do all this stuff in mass production, so it's nothing, and thank God for it. But in the Bible, Bible days and throughout history, that's not how it was. So these things were harder to come by, harder to make, more expensive, rare items compared to today. All right, so and you can see that if you know the story of Samson. He told this riddle, and he said, hey, if you can tell me this riddle, then I'll give you 30 changes of garments. And they were willing to kill so that they didn't have to be the ones to pay. And Samson was willing to kill to get that because they didn't just have that money. They didn't just have those items. So they had to kill someone to get 30 changes of garments. And you might think, well, I got way more than that in my closet or in my drawers at the house. That's what I'm saying. It's different these days. But that's something we need to understand what's going on in the Bible with this subject and in the proverb we're focusing on, with someone taking their garment and using that as a pledge for a strange woman. That's what we're going to get to. All right. Deuteronomy 24, look at verse number 6. No man shall take the nether or the upper millstone to pledge, for he taketh a man's life to pledge. This is not the garment. This is these are upper and nether millstones. This is what you use to make bread. Skip down to verse number 10. On the same subject of taking a pledge, though, when we know what that is, hopefully you're paying attention, you know what that is. Verse number 10, when thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. And if the man be poor, Thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. In any case, thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment. That's another word for garment. And bless thee, and it shall be righteous unto thee before the Lord thy God. So, in this passage, we see the implied pledge that the poor man is using is his raiment. And guess what? That's just the one he has. Because if you don't give it back to him when it's nighttime, say he doesn't pay his debt and the sun's gone down, and it's like, well, technically the agreement's not satisfied because you haven't paid me. Okay, yeah, but it's nighttime, and he needs that just to survive the night, to not, curse thee to God. And he's saying, no, just go ahead and give it to him at nighttime so he can have it at night. And this is basically not an ideal situation to be in. This is basically this poor man's last lifeline. Because what if he was doing this to someone that's not reading these laws, and they're like, oh no, you haven't paid me what you owe me, so have fun tonight, sleeping in the cold without it. You should have thought of that. You should have paid me what you owe me. Pay that thou owest. Maybe the stranger would be like that. That's why maybe you wouldn't want to do anything, make any agreements with him. So this is kind of what's going on. Don't oppress the poor man when you take a pledge of him and you take his garment. You don't just keep it all night. That's what we saw. Go ahead and turn to Exodus 22. We're going to see a little bit of the same thing. Exodus 22, look at verse 25. Exodus 22:25 says, if thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as an usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. If thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, that's the same exact thing, taking the garment to pledge, and it's the poor man, again, that we're talking about. Thou shalt deliver it unto him by that the sun goeth down. Same exact thing. Here's some more information. For that is his covering only. It is his raiment for his skin. Wherein shall he sleep? And it shall come to pass when he crieth unto me that I will hear, for I am gracious. He's like, I'm not going to bless you when you're holding on to that throughout the night. You need to give that back to him. So hopefully you understand here what's going on. A garment is a rarity. It's more expensive than it is today. It's something that's so expensive you could actually use this as collateral. You could use this as a pledge. And for a poor person, they only have one. Okay? This is not, if you're rich, you're not going to be using your garment to pledge. Right? You're going to be using probably something else you have because you're rich. You're not going to be using your only garment. Right? So when you see, for example, in Proverbs 27, let's see if I have it somewhere. It says, take his garment. Well, that sounds like he just has the one. It's just his garment. Doesn't sound like one of his garments. Sounds like he's already kind of at the bottom of the barrel in his situation. We'll get into more of that in a minute. So this is what we're seeing with this person in Proverbs. He's using his raiment. He's using his garment as a pledge. He's in a bad situation. And I'm going to get into that as we continue. The last thing we want to make sure we understand, and then we'll get into that interpretation and the applications, and that is the idea of a strange woman. Now, I think this is the easiest one. Go ahead, if you want to, turn to Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6, and we're going to be in Proverbs for a little bit anyways now. Proverbs 6, verse 23 says, for the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. To keep thee from the evil woman, notice that, the evil woman, evil meaning harmful. From the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. Same person. Here it's called the strange woman. That's what we're looking at. That's the term that's used in Proverbs 27:13 and Proverbs 20:16, our verse we're in question. And then it says, verse 25, Proverbs 6:25, lust not after her beauty in thine heart, neither let her take thee with her eyelids. Verse 26, for by means of a whorish woman, a woman that's a whore, she acts, looks, behaves like a whore. A whorish man is a whorish woman. A man is brought to a piece of bread. So again, this is painting the idea of he's on his last leg. If he's brought to a piece of bread, that's basically saying this is all he has now. Why? Because he's basically given all his money to this woman for one reason or another, and there's different ways this can apply. This could be alimony. This could be literally just you have an addiction to some harlot somewhere or whatever the case may be. But look at the last term I want to see. And the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. So these are all different terms that could apply to this type of a person, the strange woman. Had a little visitor there. The evil woman, the strange woman, the whorish woman, the adulterous woman. Now, it doesn't always have to be all of these things. It doesn't mean that the strange woman is always married, or but she's always strange. Why is she called strange? Is she just a foreigner? Like, we got to watch out for those foreign girls. Don't go after the foreign ladies. Stick with American women, the southern women. No, this is talking about someone who's not your wife, so they're strange for that reason. So therefore, you shouldn't be having anything to do with her. Well, what if I'm single? If she's not your wife, you shouldn't be having anything to do with her, because that would be fornication, which is a sin. So, strange woman is not your wife, so you should be having nothing to do with her. All right, so there's all the concepts. To recap, we talked about the surety, we talked about the stranger, the pledge, the garment as a trade item or as a pledge, and the strange woman. So hopefully you got all that. Turn back to Proverbs 27. Let's get into the second point of this sermon, which is the meaning of the proverb. Let's put it all together now. And let's look at some of the lessons and applications we can get out of this. Our verse here, Proverbs 27:13 or Proverbs 20:16, if you want to just turn there. Take his garment, that is surety for a stranger, and take a pledge of him for a strange woman. So this person, this man, it's his garment, that is surety for a stranger. He's already surety for a stranger. So what does that mean? He's responsible for making some debt that the stranger is in. He's responsible for paying that off. If the stranger doesn't pay up like he's supposed to, well, now you co-signed with him, you got to pay. And he's a stranger, and that's a bad thing here. So he's probably not going to pay. He's probably going to be someone that's just, oh, this idiot said he's going to do it for me. He's going to bail me out. He's going to be my safety net. Yeah, I'm just going to use that. Because people that are low character people, that's what they do. That's why you don't want to, yeah, I got you, bro. Someone you met at the bar or whatever. I hope you're not going there. But these low life types of people, you don't want to be doing this with. You don't really even want to be doing it with your friend or your brother. In general, that's what we saw in Proverbs 6. But especially a stranger. Okay, this person who's already agreed to be the surety for a stranger, a wicked person is the idea. He's saying, yeah, go ahead, the person that's already in that situation, go ahead and take his garment, which again, this is like his last lifeline, his last, financial, thing he has of any value that he could use, and go ahead and take a pledge of him using that garment for a strange woman. Go ahead and use that, kind of like what we saw, or I talked about with Judah. Go ahead, instead of the signet and the staff, go ahead and use your garment to tell this woman you're going to pay her off when you're done with the fun or whatever. But if you're using your garment, notice Judah, he didn't use his garment. He used what? All these other things, the staff, the bracelet, the signet. He had other stuff because he was obviously not just some poor guy. He shouldn't have been doing it either way. It's not saying if you got money, go ahead and go to the prostitutes. No, beware the strange woman in general, because they'll take you to that piece of bread if you're not already there. This guy, he's already there. He's already on his last leg, and he's already made a horrible financial choice. Now he's making an even worse financial choice. That's what you're seeing. That's what we're seeing here. And this is like directions. It's saying take his garment, because basically this is as good as done, because he's already made a horrible decision, and the narrator of the Bible is describing this type of a person as someone like, yeah, you might as well go ahead and take their garment and go ahead and sign them up for this next, because that's the road they're on. That's what they're doing. They're on their last lifeline. They're already responsible for this unreliable, wicked person's debt. Go ahead and use their last lifeline, the last bit of money they got in their bank. They're already, at a negative balance. Go ahead and take out a loan for them. Go ahead and mortgage whatever they got in their name, and go ahead and use that to get them a prostitute. That's what he's saying. Why is he saying that? And what are we seeing? Like, what is the Bible trying to teach us by saying this? And that's where we're going to now really get into that interpretation of these things. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that these are both stupid financial decisions that this guy is making. He has no foresight of the problems that are going to come his way, how he's going to be hurting, freezing when he's. You think the strange woman that's responsible of killing many men is going to give him his garment back when it's cold? I don't think so. So this is just stupid upon stupid. And it's interesting that this whole lack of foresight idea with this verse, it's interesting because in the context of Proverbs 27, verse 12, says, the verse right before our verse we're talking about in chapter 27, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Take his garment that is surety for a stranger and take a pledge of him for a strange woman. So that is a guy who has no foresight. He is a simple person, a foolish person. So that's kind of interesting if you wanted to kind of chew on that later. He's only thinking about right now. That's what we're seeing. He's thinking about, hey, I got you, bro. I'm going to cover this stranger, this guy. We're kind of friends now. And I'm going to cover whatever he's, I'll co-sign whatever, bro. And I don't have anything, but I'll co-sign with you. And now I'm going to go ahead. There's a harlot somewhere. I'm going to go ahead and take any little bit that I have left. I'm going to go ahead and get that thing going. It's like he's just thinking about whatever pleasure, whatever just good time he's having right now. He's just being an idiot and thinking about the moment only. He has no foresight. He's about to be screwed. He's about to smart for it. We learned that word earlier. Because he made a really bad choice with getting in this indebted situation with a stranger, but he's going from bad to worse because, being in debt is bad, but getting mixed up with a strange woman is way worse. And we'll see some of why that is worse later. So what is this showing? What is this teaching us? This is showing a sin tendency. This is showing when one person commits one sin, they're going to be likely to commit another sin that's the same type of sin. Because what do these sins have in common? They're both really stupid financial choices. They're both choices that show he's only thinking about the pleasure, the moment, the right now. So if you're making one stupid decision that's based upon pleasure in the moment, you're probably going to make another stupid decision based upon the pleasure in the moment. That's why the Bible's like, he hasn't done it yet, but he's going to. How do we know that? Because this is what sin nature is like. This is what we can learn. Now, maybe we're not doing these specific things, but we can learn, hey, what are your sin tendencies? What sins are you doing right now? Well, what's the progression of that? Fill in the blank. The person that's, I'm doing X, well, go ahead and he's going to be doing Y, or she's going to be doing Y very soon. Why? Because that's the natural fleshly tendency that sin is. So we need to be aware of that. We need to be aware of what our sins are. We need to be aware of our sin tendencies so that we're not just like this simple fool, just going down this downward spiral, committing the same things, getting worse and worse. And some sins are just more related to others. So whatever, you could think about how gluttony is similar to, fornication. You can see how, drugs are related to alcohol. They call marijuana the gateway drug, right? Why? Because it's the first stepping stone to all these other drugs, because that's the tendency. That's the same idea. But it's not just limited to drugs and alcohol or gluttony and fornication. It's just sin in general is like this. Financial choices is what we're seeing. Thinking about the now. No foresight. Decisions. They lead to the same thing. That's what we're seeing. So it doesn't matter. You say, well, my finances are good. Like, I'm not an idiot. I know I'm not going to agree to some indebted situation. I'm not going to a prostitute. I'm not looking for, the adulterer or whatever, the adulterous woman. Okay, but what sin problems do you have, and what's the next step coming? That's what you need to be thinking about for yourself. That's what you can learn from this proverb. the Bible connects. Where is that verse at? Let's see. Okay. The Bible connects slothfulness and the great waster in Proverbs 18:9. I won't read it for sake of time, but you see these connecting sins. It's like sin families, right? So what sin tendencies do you personally have? You think about it, you reflect. Everyone has sin. What are the problems that you tend towards? And what are those sins related to? And beware, because that's where you're likely to go. It's like gravity. It just sucks you in. That's why the Bible is us talking about this. Just like, yeah, it's just going to happen. And obviously, the more foolish you are, the stronger of a likelihood it is that you're going to do it, right? But even if you're like not just having some major foolish sin, be aware of this in yourself. So there's one thing I think we can learn right there that we're seeing taught. Obviously, and this is what's interesting about Proverbs. This is not, what I'm saying is not being spelled out. This is what you get from just understanding what is being said. This is that dark saying that you're having to get through the interpretation. If you don't agree with my interpretation, obviously you're free to believe whatever you want. I think this is what is being taught, what's going on. I don't think this is the only thing that's being taught. So you could maybe think about that. And what else I want to point out is what I've already referred to, but I want to show that now, is that not only do we see this sin tendency, sin leads to more sin, and beware of that in ourselves, but I also want to point out that this teaches that sin leads to worse sins. It's not just like similar level. No, it's getting worse. It's going down the toilet here. It's getting worse and worse, because what do we see? We see a bad financial choice where he's in debt. He owes this person money that's probably not going to pay him off, or he's probably not going to pay his debt. So you're basically just signing yourself up to have to pay something. That's stupid. That's bad. But you could work hard. You go to the ant, whatever. You could get out of that. But going to the strange woman, that's worse. It's way worse. Why? How do I know that that is worse? Well, let's look at Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 6. And I'm not going to read this, but in Proverbs 7, we see a passage, Proverbs 7, 21 through 27, this passage about the strange woman. The strange woman, there's all these constant warnings that she is killing people. People that get mixed up with a strange woman, they're like an ox that goes to the slaughter. They're like someone that's getting their liver stricken through with a dart. They're like, it says that how she's cast down many wounded and she's slain many strong men, and her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. Why? Because literally when you make this stupid choice, it's not just now you getting in debt that you're going to have to work off. You're literally flirting with dying. I mean, obviously all sin leads to death, but some sins get you there a lot faster than others. The wages of sin is death in general is true, but some sins really get you there a whole lot quicker. I mean, obviously, think about, we're talking about the drug situation. Think about marijuana versus something like, meth or something, methamphetamine or whatever. I mean, that's obviously they're all bad. They're all sin, but one is a whole lot more powerful. Not that I know from personal experience, but you get the idea. One really screws you up, and you could do it one time and die. You can smoke weed and die, but hopefully you understand the idea there. Proverbs verse 6. Let's see a financial situation that's bad being compared with getting mixed up with a strange woman and how that's worse. Proverbs 6, look at verse number 30. Proverbs 6:30, men do not despise a thief if he steal to satisfy his soul when he is hungry. But if he be found, he shall restore sevenfold. He shall give all the substance of his house. So this is a bad financial choice. You're stealing, you're hungry, so you steal. Yeah, okay. People aren't going to hate you for that. They understand, okay, you're hungry. But if you're found stealing, you're going to pay everything back sevenfold. That's 7 times what you stole. That's a bad situation. That was a bad choice. But, verse 32, but whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. Like, okay, this is bad, but this is worse, is what we're seeing. The strange woman, it's worse. Lacketh understanding. He that doeth it. Why is it worse? He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul. That's why. Not just your bank account, but your own soul. You could die. Oh, why? How? What is a way that you could die? We're going to see that here at the end of the verse. A wound and dishonor shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. For jealousy is the rage of a man. Therefore, he will not spare in the day of vengeance. What are we talking about? He will not regard any ransom, neither will he rest content, though thou givest many gifts. If you commit adultery with a man's wife, he's not looking for you to pay that off. You could steal from him. Yeah, you're paying me back sevenfold. But you commit adultery with his wife, he doesn't care what gifts you have. He don't care how rich you are. What does he want? He wants vengeance. He's not going to regard any ransom. And what does the Bible teach the punishment is for committing adultery with another man's wife? The death penalty. Because that's what any normal man would want. You see how it's worse? See how this idiot person, the proverbial person in Proverbs 27:13, see how he's getting worse? He made one bad choice, and he made another choice that's related, similar, but it's worse. It's stupid upon stupider. You're right? It's not a real word, just kidding. So, what do we need to think about? Again, think of your sin problems. What are your sins that you struggle with, that you tend to, that pull you in like gravity, as it were? Different people have different problems, different struggles. What are they related to? What are they likely to cause you to do next? And how could they be worse? And this is the danger of why you don't need to have sin and make excuses for it. Because this is how you're setting yourself up to get even worse. Because you make excuses for, oh, well, I guess it's not that bad. I've struggled with it for so long. I guess I'll just take it to the next level now. And maybe you don't even realize it's worse, but you just do it. This is why we need to be sensitive to sin and not quench the Spirit. Because you're hanging yourself when you do that. So what's the answer? Well, we need to be aware of those things. And what do we need to do? We need to nip it in the bud. We need to stay sensitive. We need to realize those sins, nip it in the bud, cast it off. Put on the new man and fight that battle. Don't grow weary in that fighting of your flesh. Because when you start getting relaxed and you're like, well, I'll just enjoy this. Whatever that is. I'll just do that. Okay, well, where are you going after that, though? What's next? So, we need to treat sin like, the Bible talks about when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And then when sin is finished, it bringeth forth death. We need to treat sin like pardon the example, like a baby that you need to abort. Because that's the example that the Bible uses about it, the lust conceiving, and then it brings forth sin. And then when that 9 months of sin is brewing, as it were, and then the baby of sin is born, well, now it's death. Don't wait until it's born. Don't let it get to the finish the first trimester. As soon as you get that spiritual pregnancy test, all right, we're spiritually aborting this lust, this sin. It needs to be nipped in the bud. That's what it needs to happen. Obviously, abortion is murder. So, it's too bad that we have to make that comparison, but that should go without saying also. Hopefully you understand. Don't let yourself have to get to rock bottom to figure out that you need to change. Like the prodigal son, right? That's what happened to him. He was just, living on the high horse and just spending all of his daddy's money, all of his inheritance that he got from him. And then when he got rid of all of it, then the famine comes, and then what? Now he's just in the same situation that this guy you could imagine in Proverbs is in. And think about this guy. If you're agreeing to pay someone else's debt, you probably don't have the money to give them. because then you would just give him the money he needed that he borrowed, right? So you don't have money, and this guy is not going to pay. That's what I think we can deduce fairly from that situation. You're going to be hurting for that, like the Bible says. And if you're on your last leg and all you have left to use as a collateral gift or pledge is your garment, now you're going to be in all kinds of problems. You're going to be in debt up to your eyeballs, having to work that off. You're going to be freezing at night, and you're probably going to have someone trying to kill you because you committed adultery, or some pimp's going to try to kill you, or whatever the situation is. You're just having all kinds of problems. But you're not experiencing any of it right now. Right now, everything's good. But again, that's that lack of foresight. That's the lack of awareness of the danger. You don't want to have all those problems happen to you and get to that rock bottom like, oh crap, look at all of these horrible problems that I have now because of all the decisions I've been making for all this time, like the prodigal son. Don't let that happen before you come to yourself like he did. Come to yourself now. Nip it in the bud now. Think about these things now. Be sensitive to it now. Don't learn the hard way. Don't be a part of the rule. Because Proverbs here, it's not every instance this always happens. Proverbs are giving general rules, general teachings that you tend to always see, that always happen. But it doesn't mean that there can't be exceptions to these things. It doesn't mean that someone couldn't do the first part of the proverb and then not do the second. That would be the exception, though. So make sure that you are the exception. That's what you can learn from that. Why? Because, sin is like, an object at rest, or that object in motion. It tends to want to stay at rest if it's already at rest. Or it tends to want to stay in motion if it's in motion. Whatever your sin is. That's the tendency. Yes, there could be an exception. Make sure you are that exception. But how are you going to do that? You're going to have to take heed to yourself. Because with God, all things are possible. Thank God for that. And as I kind of wrapping up here, our final thoughts here, I'm going to have you turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Here's a good formula to be the exception and to nip these problems and these sin lusts in the bud. Here's a good formula here we see in 1 Corinthians 10. Verse number 12 says, 1 Corinthians 10:12, wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. There's one part of this formula. Verse 13, there hath no temptation taken you but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. What do we see there? We see that there's always an out. God will always provide you an out. You don't have to commit that sin, even though the temptation may be strong. You don't have to do it. God will always give you a way out. So, find the way out. Look for the out. It's there. That's part of the formula. We're going to recap it in a minute. Verse 14, last part of the formula. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. Now, idolatry is, I would just say, it fits in the context here, but you can substitute that out and put your sin there. Okay? So what do we see? A good formula here. Take heed. So beware of your sin. When the temptation comes, look for the way out. And then when you find that way out, flee. Run. You find that door, run through it. Don't think about it. Take off. You get your out, you take it. That's a good formula. Beware, take heed, look for the way out, and flee out of that door when you find it. Take it seriously. That requires you to take these things seriously. You can't just be like, yeah, sure, I'll just cover everybody. I'll just buy and be and co-sign, just where I sign. I don't even care what the fine print says. And yeah, hey, go ahead and take my car, and I'll go ahead and I'm all in on the whatever. It reminds you of the casino, right? Where this is where a lot of stupid financial choices are being made. Yeah, just put my keys on there now. I've already lost thousands of dollars coming to this stupid place that's designed to take all my money. I'm going to go ahead and put my house on it, my car's on it, all the savings and inheritance on it. And oh yeah, and then just so happens that there's prostitutes all over the place too in these places. Not that I know from experience, but this is what you hear. Because why? What do these things have in common? They're both really stupid financial choices. So beware. Look for the way out. Flee. Here's another good tip. Pray for God to help you. Sometimes that might just be the way out. You're feeling the temptation. God, please help me right now. Pray. Stop stop, drop, and pray. All right? If that's what you need to do. So, just some other tips. Identify your sins. Identify the sins that they're related to. Recognize the downward spiral is there. Don't get prideful. Don't think that you stand. Take heed. You think, him that thinketh he standeth, take heed. Realize that there is a downward spiral. Don't allow the momentum of your flesh to take you down. So that's the verse. So hopefully, that's the verse and the sermon. So hopefully you understand what all those things mean, and hopefully you understand the interpretation now, and you can apply those things to your life and study more of it on your own. Read over that verse and plug in the meaning of it on your own time, and really get that for yourself if you need to. And for fun, look at other verses around it. Look at chapter 20. Look at the other verses in chapter 27. See how these things all go together. Hopefully it was educational and helpful. And with that, let's bow our heads and have a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity to preach. Thank you for allowing us to have this time to hear your word. Pray that this sermon was things that you would have to be taught, and that it was pleasing in your sight. Pray that these things will be a blessing, and that you would allow us to sniff out any sins and sin problems that we have, that we all struggle with, whatever they are for us personally, and that we could just take heed to those things and beware and not get sucked into this black hole of our flesh, this downward spiral, Lord. Help us to have victory over the flesh so that we could be used by you greatly, Lord. And bless us as we go our separate ways here in a moment. And in Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right, Brother Preston, if you could lead us in our last song.
All right, if you could turn in your hymnals to song number 250.